Breaking news from the House January 6th committee. 6 more subpoenas aimed, according to committee chairman Benny Thompson, at the effort to send bogus slates of presidential electors to Washington for Congress to certify. 2 Trump officials were subpoenaed, along with 4 state lawmakers and officials from battleground states. One of them is Pennsylvania State Senator Douglas Mastriano. Our Gary Tuckman caught up with him during a rally last year, pushing for Pennsylvania to conduct a similar so-called audit to the one he'd just been down to see in Arizona.
Would you like Democrats to come here with the slate of benches and overturn your vote?
You're afraid of transparency.
I'm not afraid of nothing.
You're terrified. He's afraid.
Are you afraid of Democrats coming here?
He's afraid of a proper forensic, and I wonder what are we afraid of here?
The truth.
The truth.
Would you want Democrats to do that here?
Why did the Democrats ask for it?
It was really heartbreaking.
There have been 2 recalls.
What really heartbreaking to me, I mentioned in my speech, I've seen better elections in Afghanistan.
For more on all this, we're joined now by CNN's Ryan Nobles at the Capitol. Ryan, tell us more about who these people are who are getting subpoenas and why the committee wants to talk to them.
Well, it's interesting, John, because these are the folks that were behind the scenes in this effort to coordinate a group of swing state Republicans that were going to offer up a fake set of electors that they sent to not only the vice president, but to the United States Congress with the hopes that they would be the electors that would ultimately give Donald Trump back the White House. And among them, Michael Roman and G. Michael Brown. These were 2 of the officials that were responsible for the Election Day activities for the Trump campaign on that day, and then these state level officials who played a big role in all the activity that took place after the election to sow doubt in the results in these key swing states despite any evidence whatsoever. What it shows here is that the committee believes that this effort was part of a much bigger scheme to try and circumvent the will of the American people, and that ultimately it led to the violence that we saw here on January 6th. John.
So, Ryan, a number of these individuals are elected officials, and some are running for higher office. Are any of these positions that they're running for responsible for election integrity?
Yeah, no doubt about that, John. Douglas Mastriano, who you just showed there in Pennsylvania, he's one of the leading Republican candidates for governor of Pennsylvania. And then another name, Mark Fincham from New Mexico. He's currently running to be the Secretary of State in New Mexico. That office is, of course, responsible for conducting and overseeing elections in the state of New Mexico. This is part of a trend that we're seeing across the country where folks that are aligned with the former President Donald Trump and who support and continue to peddle his big lies about the election results are now seeking offices where they would have direct responsibility over administering future elections. John.
Ryan Nobles, thank you so much for being with us. And because of the Arizona content of tonight's subpoenas, we're joined now by Arizona's top election official, Secretary of State Katie Hobbs. Secretary Hobbs, first of all, what do you make of these subpoenas, and what does it say to you about the committee's investigation?
Well, this is an investigative body, and I'm glad that action is finally being taken. We've been calling out the actions of State Republican Party Chair Kelly Ward and Mark Fincham, who actually is running for Secretary of State in Arizona, not New Mexico, for the last year plus. And so I'm glad that something is finally being done. The actions of everybody involved in this large coordination have to be held accountable.
And Fincham, as you noted, is actually running for your job as Secretary of State there. And Kelly Ward is the chair of the Arizona Republican Party. Not only is Ward one of the fake electors, the Arizona Republican Party actually released video of her and others in December of 2020 signing the fake document. So what do you hope the committee is able to learn from these individuals?
Well, I think what we're seeing is that what's coming out is that more and more of these election subversion activities have been coordinated at very high levels from the former president and his allies down to the level of these folks at the state that were trying to convince people to overturn the will of the voters.
So last month, the committee served subpoenas for state and local Republican officials who they alleged had knowledge of the fake electors plot. But now we see 2 Trump campaign employees seemingly accused of being directly involved here. So how big of a deal is that if there was coordination from the campaign itself?
Well, I think it's a very big deal. And I think we've known from the beginning that these seemingly chaotic and uncoordinated attacks actually were coordinated, and that these folks were just trying everything they could, throwing everything against the wall to see what stuck. But there was definitely coordination, and thankfully, that is starting to come more and more to light through the activities of the commission.
As we noted, several of these people subpoenaed today and are allegedly involved in this plot are running for higher office positions that control elections. What kind of impact do you think this would have on the integrity of elections?
Well, we know that democracy prevailed in 2020 because people on both sides of the aisle, people with integrity, did their jobs to uphold the will of the voters. And what we're seeing now is an attempt to install Trump loyalists at every level, so that those checks and balances that exist will be removed. And quite honestly, that's why I'm running for governor, because we have to have people at every level that are going to continue to uphold the will of the voters, regardless of whether or not they're happy with the outcome. And we need those checks and balances. And I welcome folks to join me in that fight at katiehobbs.org.
Secretary Hobbs, we appreciate you being with us tonight. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So joining me now, the former FBI Director, Andrew McCabe. He is now a CNN senior law enforcement analyst. Andrew, thanks for joining us this evening. Good evening to you. These subpoenas are targeting 2 members of Trump's campaign and 4 GOP officials in battleground states. That's on top of 14 other subpoenas last month tied to these fake electors. What is the critical thing to determine about this plot?
Well, Don, excuse me, this all comes back to the documents that the committee came across several weeks ago that indicated that these lists of fake electors, GOP electors, had been submitted by some states to the National Archives and to the process in an effort to try to overturn the results of the election. The committee has been assiduously focused on that in the last several weeks, and they have subpoenaed just about everyone you can think of that might have been involved in that activity. It is clear that they believe that this was potentially a legitimate conspiracy to try to overturn the results of the election, and they are trying to see if they can hold the president or some of his advisors and supporters accountable, or to indicate whether or not they were kind of the driving force behind that effort.
The Select Committee says it has, quote, credible evidence that Roman and Brown, the 2 former Trump campaign officials subpoenaed today, encouraged state legislators to appoint slates of fake electors, excuse me, to after the results of the election. How big of a deal is that the campaign may have been directly involved in this scheme?
It's a big deal, Don, because it's one more link in this chain. We know what happened at one end of the chain, right? We know that these states actually got fake electors, signed up, put them on these letters, and sent the letters in an effort to turn around the results. The other end of the chain, you have the person who would have benefited from that activity, which is, of course, the former president. So they're trying to connect the former president with what actually happened. So to know that someone from his campaign, somebody working directly for his election interest, was actually in contact with these state officials and trying to persuade them to do exactly what they did, really brings the 2 ends of that chain together in a very damaging way for the Trump folks.
Andrew, Chairman Thompson says that, Benny Thompson says that they're looking for records and testimony. Are these people likely to cooperate? Do they have a choice?
Well, they don't technically have a choice, right? They've been subpoenaed. It's a lawful subpoena. You're required to comply with the law and to comply with the requests of the subpoena. They can try to challenge the subpoena by filing a suit in federal court to say that it's overbroad or unfair, they shouldn't be subjected to it. Those challenges are likely to go nowhere. They can also comply and come in and refuse to provide information. They can invoke their Fifth Amendment rights against self-incrimination and essentially tell the committee nothing. But ignoring the subpoena and doing nothing is really not a good plan for any of them. And I would expect that most will comply in one way or another.
All right. Andrew McCabe, thank you very much. I appreciate that.